Time to look at some of the business stories that are making the headlines. With me is Richard Fenton, debt buster. Welcome to Channel M today.
Good evening.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good news to start with. The UK closing in on recovery. Decline is slowing, I believe.
Yeah, and this is tremendous news, really, for everybody. Analysts were earlier on in the year predicting a slowdown, an actual slowdown between 0.8% and 0.7%. What we've actually seen is that figure reduce only marginally down to 0.6%. But the real good news is that the next set of figures that we will see at the end of September should, fingers crossed, show a growth of 0.3%. Now, if we maintain that position to the end of the next quarter, we're out of recession.
So that's the definition of recession is negative growth, if you'll pardon the contradiction in terms, for 2 quarters. And to be out of it, you have to have positive growth.
Exactly.
And we're looking like we're heading that way.
It's certainly looking that way. It's looking better than it has for the last 3 years.
How are people you speaking to in the business community feeling? I mean, are we more optimistic in Greater Manchester than we have been over the last few months?
There's certainly less panic in the air. The banks are beginning to move now. The banks are beginning to lend to smaller businesses. They really do need to get down to the real grassroots levels and start injecting capital into the small one-man band operations and start showing some confidence there, because that's where the real economy starts. The real good news has really come from the spurt in construction industry, because that's the major key factor in any recession. Once that starts to pick up, everything else just tends to fall into place.
And they extended the scrappage scheme as well, didn't they? So that's presumably quite good for the motor industry and related businesses. Yeah,
I'm a little bit sceptical. I always have been about this scrappage scheme, and I think attributing any of this growth towards that particular scheme is a little bit pie in the sky, to be honest. And I think this is just the Labour Party conference trying to capitalise on what's going on at the moment.
Well, speaking of the conference, let's talk about it, because Mr Brown gave his big speech today. The business secretary spoke yesterday. Are the business community at all pleased by what they've heard?
I think the City are particularly nervous about Alistair Darling's comments yesterday about the legislation that the City and Europe as a whole are going to bring in relation to these automatic bonuses for the bankers.
The City bankers would be a bit worried about the fact that their bonuses might be stopped, and ordinary people might be thrilled, but it's not likely to happen, is it?
It's not likely to happen to any great extent. The UK is currently the leading financial institution in the world, and we enjoy a great deal of benefits through being so, and to implement such legislation will encourage people to leave the country. Consequently, the industry will leave the country. I think this is a lot of pre-election rhetoric which will just turn into hot air once the voters have been to the polling stations.
One other, while we're on shopping and businesses there related, shoppers are being duped by cut-price alcohol. Royal College of Physicians are telling us this. Apparently, if you get something for apparently cheap in a supermarket, you're paying elsewhere. I
think this is amazing that the Royal College of Physicians have actually come up with this as a theory. This is the oldest trick in the book. This is what you'd call a loss leader. Alcohol is a great way to inspire people to come into your store and make purchases. And in particular, in times of recession, actually alcohol sales and tobacco sales go through the roof because people are feeling a little bit more stressed out, and people tend to drink at home rather than out and about. And people like, all the major supermarkets, without naming anybody in particular, are going to exploit this to the full. And where you might buy a normal bottle of champagne that costs 30 quid at Christmas, it might be down to £9.99. You're going to buy a case for 50 quid, etc.
Perhaps it's what they're putting the loss leaders on that worries the physicians, the fact that it's alcohol that's being cut rather than other products to entice people into the stores. They're worried about the health implications.
Yeah, I think that there's some figures that are being bandied around at the moment that if we were to actually put a minimum charge of 50 pence per unit on alcohol in supermarkets, that would save the non-drinking community an average of £71 per year. And if we reverse that, the big drinkers would actually spend £160 more in a year, which those maths make perfect sense, but they don't make perfect sense for the big supermarkets, and it's not going to happen voluntarily. The government would have to step in and do something. And you know what? I don't think they're going to, because there's huge revenues there to be had, and we're already talking about
tax to be generated by alcohol, isn't there? Richard, always good to get your thoughts. Thank you for that.